Well, good morning again. It is great to see you guys with lights on. This is awesome. This is Jeff and Vanessa Royal. Vanessa was just up here singing her little heart out, and Jeff is usually somewhere on the back, like pushing buttons and stuff. And so they've been with us for a while now and serving with us. They've been in our small group, for a good while, and so it's fun to have them up here and getting to share some of their story with you. But here's what I would like for us to do today. So I'm going to kind of walk them through several questions. We've already discussed all of this earlier in the week, and so I kind of know what their answers are going to be, and so or at least the ones that I want you to hear. And so because we could talk for a long time about these things. I mean, there's so much to y'all's story that's gone on in the last few years. Some of it we've gotten to be a part of and watch you walk through and kind of pray along through some of this with you and feel honored to get to do that. But there are some things that I think specifically we all need to hear as far as your story goes. So first, we're going to be real specific with their story. As far as kind of their context, and they're going to kind of paint the picture of what life looked like a few years ago, and just because I want you guys to see yourself in their shoes, especially if you're younger, like if you are kind of on the front end of career and that stage of life, that sort of thing. A lot of what they achieved and have achieved in their lifetime really are things that we often are striving for. And so to hear some of their story, it's like, what was wrong with what you had? I mean, that's kind of the picture we get. It's like, that's what I thought I was aiming for. I mean, kind of the American dream, so to speak. And so I want us to see that specifically. But by the end of this, as I said a minute ago, I want us to see ourselves in the story, because not their specific story, but how this applies to your story. Because there are some principles here, some foundational things that we can walk away with today, that we have to walk away with today and consider as we think about these things. And so, as I said, you just saw in the bumper video over the last few weeks, we've been talking about this idea of rest and Sabbath and creating space in our lives intentionally. That doesn't happen on accident. Everybody knows that. Space does not accidentally happen. It's something you have to really intentionally strive for and create in your life, and it usually requires some sacrifice and some effort. But we never regret that in the end. What we in the end regret is not doing it sooner. And so we've seen some of that. Now I want us to hear it kind of firsthand what that's looked like. And so I want to introduce them, but then I'm going to let them introduce themselves as well. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do, Jeff and Vanessa, is first of all, just kind of paint a picture for us. Just back up a few years. What did life look like for you guys, professionally, relationally, just kind of stage of life, financially? What? Give us an idea of what life looked like. And then we'll go from there. Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa. It's me again. I think the best way to describe where we were when kind of just before the shift in our life really started to happen is from the outside looking in, I would say that things looked really good. And in some ways they were. We had just kind of in that stage of our life where so many of the things that we had sacrificed for and worked for and really had been driven to achieve were happening. We were in really good places in our career, and we had a lot of things that we thought that would make us happy. We lived on the lake, and just our lives were all about the lake. I will just say that it was it was our identity. We were, that's people think of us at that time as Jeff and Vanessa on the lake and the boats and the there was a lot of fun going on, but there wasn't necessarily much else.
Yeah, like she was saying, I mean, at that time I was really involved with the homeowner association. We could really, along with a great team there, we could pretty much do what we wanted to. Parades, and we had, three boats, luxury cars, just anything. We just had a lot of stuff, and I was at the height of my career. Vanessa, very prominent at the bank. She was a relationship banker here in town. I was construction management consultant, flying all over, managing large complex construction projects all over the United States. We both had very good incomes. Pretty much anything we wanted to just fly down to the Keys or drive down sometimes, and we could kind of go and come as we pleased. And so,
what would you guys? And I asked them to be pretty specific with that because I wanted you to. That wasn't gloating. I said, be specific. I want everybody to hear, because a lot of these things are the things we strive for. I mean, this is the stuff. I mean, and they'll tell you this. There was nothing inherently wrong with any of this. Okay, but I just wanted them to paint a picture here. And so what would you say, like, what was priority in your life? Like, kind of how did you live life? What did relationships look like with your kids? The whole 9 yards. Like, what did this look like?
I will start by saying I've told a lot of, especially young mothers and young parents, this, kids grow up fast. And I was kind of a late mom to begin with. My career was very important to me. It was, I hate to say it, but I put it first for a really long time. And I was just driven, somewhat, it was internal. That's just how I'm wired. I'm a little type A and driven, and didn't want to let people down. Wanted to be independent and always know that I carried my own weight. And so I just had incessantly been striving and driving for a long time, and was getting, I would laugh, I wasn't saying I was getting really burnt out, but I was just going and going and going to keep up with, the more you achieve, the more you have, the more pressure there is to maintain it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for me, it was, this lake house, it was kind of an idol to me. I mean, it was above God. I put it above the time with my family, my relationship with my kids. And it was the possessions, it was never perfect enough. We, you always had to do this improvement, nicer vehicle. You just kind of, we call it the big lie between us. You were born, and you had to go through, high school, and some of us fortunate enough to go to college. You buy your first car, you come in debt, and then you go to college, you get more debt, and then you graduate, and you buy that house and more debt, and then you buy a nicer car, then bigger house, then nicer car, and bigger house, and then next thing you know, you've got this 3,400 square foot monster with seawalls and boathouses and 3 boats, lots of stuff to keep up with that just sucking the life out of you.
So and that's where I want you to transition. So life looked really good, and as far as kind of from the outside looking in, matter of fact, they joke that he was kind of known as like the mayor of Lake Jordan. It was like he was just kind of like, he was well known. Everybody knew him as
That's
the
what
lake
people
guy.
called him.
I don't know if that was a compliment or not, but loved being on the lake. Always playing and doing those things, and so which again, nobody was telling you that these things were wrong. I want us to hear. It wasn't like, well, we went to church one day and I felt really guilty about all this stuff. These were what began to happen in their life. The way they've described this to us so many times, it wasn't overnight, but this kind of subtle shift of like, we've kind of gotten there, And I recognize now, because we've heard these stories of like, oh yeah, I just wasn't satisfied with all this stuff, and yet nobody's like making a decision to live differently. It's like, yeah, but that you've still got all the stuff, so like I at least want the stuff so that I can say that I'm not happy with it either. I mean, everybody ever felt that way? It's like, at least you're getting to taste that and figure it out for yourself. And like, we never take the advice of, well, maybe I can live differently now on the front end. And so what was the dissatisfaction? Like, what did it begin to look like? You know, as we were talking about this, you talked about priorities. You talked about, you said you just felt like you, and this was kind of what you began to recognize in yourself, that you were just kind of blindly following a path that culture had laid out for you. I mean, it's just kind of walking right along and doing what everybody else does, and you expressed being exhausted. You found you wanted more time with your family, but didn't know quite how to get there. Feeling like your lives didn't have much purpose. That was one of the things you said. And you wanted to devote more things to devote more time to the things that matter. And so, what were some of the things, not that you started to do, but that that caused you to start feeling this, that led you in this direction? Like, what was it that you feel like brought about that sense of something is not right, something needs to change? What brought that about, would you say? Just over time. I know it wasn't like one thing.
Well, I remember quite a few, kind of going back to the Sabbath. We, when you have, with the boats and as much time and effort went into maintaining all that. Those of you who have those things, it's just always something to do. And we didn't have time to enjoy it. We were just tired and we needed rest. And so I think when we started to make the decision to rest, we started observing the Sabbath, not working on seawalls, not replacing boards on the pier.
Now, when did this happen? Like when you started doing?
Probably about 3 years ago.
Yeah, 3 years.
That was one of the first things.
Yeah.
We started praying. We knew we were empty, and that's it's hard to sit up here and talk. Well, we had this and we had this, and that is the last thing. That's the last thing we want to leave anybody with. We were just asked to kind of paint that picture, but we were this pretty house. If you ride by the house and you look up, it was a beautiful house, and it represented all of these things that were not satisfying. They weren't fulfilling us at all. It was almost painful. It looked really good on the outside, but it felt really empty on the inside because it just didn't feel real.
Yeah.
It didn't have a purpose. Your life just being filled with nice things is not very purpose driven.
And we were so busy, trying to pay for all this stuff and, living, being stressed out with work and going back and forth. At the time I was working in Montgomery, driving back and forth down, many of y'all know, 231 is not the most peaceful places to be commuting. It was an hour each way, and I did the math. I drove that path from the lake 15 years, and simple math. I'm having a hard time right now, but I gave up 360 days of my life in a vehicle for a job that was basically I was miserable because I was there, because I was working for stuff that I didn't really enjoy. And I just was kind of like, tricked into this thinking that this is what we should have, this is what we should do. And I wouldn't have peace and freedom. And I watch my parents, they work till they provide a good life for us. They get older, and then they buy a camper and want to retire and go these places. And then they start having health issues. They can't travel, and my mom had 2 hip replacements and has a hard time getting around. But start recognizing, what am I working for to save money? I mean, every day's not promised. And then when I get to the end, I might not be able to even enjoy it. So I think that just kind of started the wheel spinning in my head about, things that I need to prioritize. And, my kids, I watched them. They were on the lake. They had a great time, both competitive wakeboarders, and it was great. We had a great time. But, it was not the prettiest picture like she was talking about. But it was just, we were just trying to, as they say, keep up with the Joneses and, perfect the perfection.
So that was kind of the picture. That was some of the feelings you started feeling, and I think all of us recognize some of that. In today's world, it doesn't matter how wealthy you are or not, or what your job situation or financial background looks like. We all experience this to some degree. Just kind of this weird nudge for some of us. For some of us, we recognize it as the Lord's voice. For some of us, it's just like, we're just bothered, watching social media or seeing everybody's highlight reel in their life. And it's like, what am I living for? And we start having those questions. And, some of us do something about it. Others of us don't. And so what I want you to hear now is just what they did. This is not the recipe, okay? This isn't like this is how you do it. But I just want you guys to describe then what you did about it, because you didn't live with it and then just move on. It's like, I really don't, but I don't know what to do. Got to keep the job because I got to keep the boats in the house, and I got to, I've invested all of this, and so clearly I'm not going to give any of that up. What did y'all start doing? What were some of the steps you took to begin making some changes? Because it wasn't just one big thing overnight, right? There we go. This was a slow process. So kind of describe for us, what did you do?
Well, it really started with, us having a desire to deepen our relationship with Christ. We were both, Jeff was a fairly new Christian, and I had kind of grown up in church, but had kind of drifted away and was kind of coming. We were growing together and also individually, and just wanted more fulfillment and kind of really purpose, praying that the Lord would reveal things in our life that were separating us, because we knew we wanted to be closer to the Lord. We wanted to live a life of purpose. We didn't feel like we were doing that, and we didn't really understand why. And so we really started to pray that the Lord would reveal strongholds in our life, or things that were separating us from Him. And he did. He started to with that, just a small whisper. And I think, everyone knows that feeling just of the Holy Spirit nudging. There's this thing that, it started with there's just this thing that I want you to consider, that I want you to consider doing or not doing, there's a lot of, for me, because I'm stubborn and I have a mind of my own, I resisted that for a long time. And
nobody else does that, though.
Right. Yeah, it's just me.
It was just you.
But we didn't make a conscious effort, we're just going to radically change our life. It did not look like that.
Right.
It was these small requests from the Lord.
Well, give us some ideas. What did this look like?
For me, I mean, I've been struggling with. For me, I've had a big focus on material things, finances, and stuff. And for me, it was tithing. That's something I'd never really done in my life, and I was going to be obedient to the Lord. And I just started doing that when I was in my other job, and I think that really kind of opened the door for me to be obedient to what the Lord was speaking to in my life.
And how long ago was this?
This was about 5 years ago. About 4 or 5, yeah.
That was really early on.
It was really early on. I mean, I was, Yeah, and we were both at the top of our game. You know, both very well good incomes and stuff, and it was hard. I mean, it was, and I said, well, it's not something for me to give up, and that's a lot, and I did, and I was going through a walk, and then there were some other things. He's talked about strongholds, and I think it's really the gateway that broke this whole thing open in 2 years. I mean, being part of the lake, a vacation lifestyle, you know, relaxation. There's a lot of alcohol, and I was part of all that. And I was, not setting a good example for my people around me, my children, my family, my peers, and the Lord just started weighing on me. And I had a really good friend come to me. Well, he really wasn't a good friend at that time. He is now. But it was after a event on the lake. And everyone was there, and he made the time to come back and pray over me and my family. And I just woke up the next morning, and the Lord said, "Stop drinking." And it's not an easy battle. It was just a decision to put between him and me that it was creating a void between my relationship with Christ and myself. I was functioning. I was, living a life that everyone dreamed of or thought was great. But, I was still going to work, and, I was running all this stuff, events and stuff. But, I started, the same friend prayed over me. He told me, you need to make a journal. Like I said, I've only been a Christian for 7 years. I mean, I was baptized long ago, but I really started my adult walk 7 years ago. When I was baptized again and led a small group, and during that small group, the Lord brought me Vanessa, and I'm grateful for all He's done. But my friend told me to keep a journal, and I keep it on my phone. And that's the very first entry in my phone was I keep it by date. I'm very date-oriented because I do scheduling of construction. But it was 2020, 07, 05, right after 4th of July. It stopped drinking. And it wasn't easy. I mean, it's still hard. But he weighed on my heart to give it up. And just as those things kind of started to unfold, I kept writing prayers are answered and the way the Lord was speaking to me and things, I started, left my job. I started working for myself. I've been doing that for 18 months. He kind of opened up these doors for me. We're be able to give up these possessions and get freedom. We look like we had a great life from the outside, but it was stressful. I mean, I guess that's what led to the alcohol and stuff like that. And then the material things, you're trying to fill your life with all this stuff. Everybody, it's social media. And
so, and again, this isn't about, this isn't about a prescription for what you're supposed to do. This is just a description of what y'all did. And so that was years ago that you started just a simple step of, hey, I think I'm going to start giving. I'm going to start tithing on my income, something you'd never done before. A lot of people haven't done that. That's just something, especially if you didn't grow up in church. It's like, that's the last thing I'm going to do. I'll fix a lot of other things before I'm going to start giving away income. Especially, things are too tight, blah, blah, blah. And so, that was a big decision for you. You felt led to give up alcohol at some point, but that was later. What were some other things that you began to think, this is what I need to do? This is what we feel like God is leading us to do. This is the next step for us. What were some of those things? And then what did that do in your life? Like, what did creating that space do for you guys?
I mean, it gave us time to kind of rest. I mean, what this series has been to kind of think about priorities. You know, we've been really praying about our purpose and what we're going to do with the next 20 years of our life, because we wanted to look different. You know, we wanted to be, you know, we didn't want to work and retire. We wanted to live a life that we were happy, enjoyed doing as we went along, and more purpose filled. And you know, we wanted to live we wanted to have a not a career but a calling. And I think the Lord was calling us to do that. We didn't know why. We were really just kind of like, okay, this is what we're gonna do.
Yeah. And so, what were some of the other things you ended up doing? Like,
Well, I think the more we leaned in and took and trusted, and were obedient is really, and that is not my it's not easy for me, you know. To at times, and we would talk about this, we would go through it individually together. We did also some fasting, which I encourage anyone who has not fasted before to consider that. It's a powerful tool to just deepen your faith and your relationship with the Lord. But the more we were willing to take baby steps, following in his voice, the more he began to show us that he was working. Because it wasn't about the tithing or the alcohol or the big house, the jobs. This wasn't a career lifestyle change we were looking for. This was a stirring in our soul we'd prayed for, but it was a stirring of the Holy Spirit and him speaking and us being open to just taking a step. There was a devotional that we were reading during this time called Just Enough Light for the Step I'm On. And we would go to that sometimes because when you're giving things up, it's not easy and it's painful. And I had most of my life thought of when the Lord's asking you to do something that you don't want to do. Maybe I saw it as a punishment. I'm not sure if that would be the right word, but I never thought of it being he is asking me to give something up so that this space in my heart will be created where he can move. And our spirit, our soul, we were too full of other things, work, stuff, busyness, that the Lord didn't have enough room to work in our lives. And we didn't know that's what he was doing. We know that now. But those little things, the little yeses that we were willing to give, even when it didn't make sense or we didn't want to, he just really started to move. And it was obedience. Jeff's walk was different from mine, but they were the same in that they were acts of obedience that led to a deeper walk with the Lord, that led to him revealing more of a plan and a purpose for our life that wasn't just, careers are great, jobs are great. We're not on a mission to tell people to leave their jobs. Right. That's what it looked like for us. But what we did that everyone can relate to is we said, okay, yes, Lord. He's asking me to do something. Sometimes it's a small step. Sometimes it's things that kept us up at night and took months and years and a lot of tears and was very hard to do. Yeah. This wasn't an easy, fun, filled.
It was a process.
Process, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, part of it for me was, selling that lake house. I mean, it was really the kind of the pinnacle because it was, I was an idol. I put it above my relationship with Christ. I was, just trying to perfect it and not concentrating on Him. And then the Lord said, "Put it up for sale." Put it up for sale, and enacted what He did. He had a little different plan. I went to walk that happened through Walk to Emmaus. I highly encourage that too. You don't have cell phones or anything like that, and it's great. 3 days of peace. But it was really, really a blessing. But as these things, we started recognizing all this stuff was kind of taken away from the important things of our life, and we couldn't just focus on. And we wanted to shift more to a purpose. And as we don't watch television, we stay up at night, and even those distractions of life, and we learned through that too that we become more peaceful because you see advertisements, they're constantly crammed down your throat. Bad news. There's nothing on the news that's really good. But just things like that. And it became more time to spend with my children and my parents, and I'm grateful for the Lord for opening those doors. And I look back, and here I am. He freed me from a job that I was bound to that was just killing me. It was really stressful. I just hated it. And I thought it was the American dream, but it wasn't. And Vanessa was the same way. She was an aspiring banker, and everything. She was closing deals left and right. And she walked a walk of faith too. The Lord just put on her heart to give it up. And she's called me and she goes, "Jeff, we've been really praying about this freedom, or this direction in our life, and the Lord just put in my heart to leave the bank." And I'm like, "Oh, do
Okay.
Yeah, okay." And she did it. And we had no plan.
I quit my job a while back, right?
She had no plan, no purpose or no parachute. But we knew the Lord would provide. I had just started my own consulting firm. We were fresh, and being self-employed. Those of you who are fortunate enough to do it, and it's my first time in 27 years. But it gives you, Lord, those freedoms that I'd been praying for. To be able to spend time with my parents every Friday. I go see my parents. Dad's 80. It's a lot of time I missed out on. I'm trying to collect it, one steak biscuit at a time. But I'm grateful for the Lord for providing that freedom for me to be able to work and to make decisions about what I want to do and spend my life doing. And for Vanessa to have to leave the bank, we didn't know exactly how she was going to do it, and she's doing another. She's pursuing a passion that she's an artist, as well as she's a great singer. But the Lord just told her to start painting one day, and she's got a great talent and a gift, and we're able to pursue those things in our life that we're missing, the things that gave us purpose. And as Tripp said, everyone's walk's different. Some of you may aspire to work those 60 hours a week, and maybe your spiritual gift is to help your church with that tithing or different things, or give things up. But one thing in your life, I knew it was the alcohol. It was the gateway for me. And I've got that journal on my phone, and I added to it this morning. And I scroll back, and I highly encourage you to see because I'm fairly new at this, 7-year Christian, that as you pray, those prayers become more and more fulfilled by God's purpose for your life. And it does take a reminder, because it'll help you close in your relationship with the Lord. And I do. I mean, I'm a sinner just like everyone else. And as I stray, I go back there and look, and I say, Lord said do this. And it's just kind of a roadmap for me.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story, and it's one that's still in progress. What I love about this is this isn't like 30 years ago. This was like within the last, a lot of this happened, kind of came to a head within the last year and a half, with the job situations. I mean, literally, Vanessa quit her job at the bank just several months ago, or tried to several times, and they kept giving her raises and promotions. I'm not even joking. Like, they didn't want her. I'm moving this. I feel like it's. Oh yeah, it's just that's why. They didn't want her to go anywhere. And so, because she was successful, she was doing very well. And yet she's decided this is a decision that she needs to make. Not everybody needs to make that decision, because, when they tell their story, and then and even as we were talking about it earlier this week, I told, always I'm kind of the devil's advocate. I put myself out in your seat, it's like, what is it like to hear this? And, what does that mean for me? And a lot of us hear these things and we're like, yeah, well, that's great, but y'all probably had plenty of money. You sold your, super fancy house. And so you had, able to pay off debt if you had any, because you probably didn't have any because you had these sweet gigs, you had these awesome jobs. And, well, we don't live that way. And we've got a bunch of kids and I've got student loan debt out the wazoo. And so I'm not in a position, I can't just go and quit my job and sell my house. And like, what would we do? And so we take it this like, we just assume that hearing their story means that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. And that's not what anybody is suggesting. That's not why they tell their story. It is very much a work in progress for them. But what they will tell you is that they have greater peace than they've had in a long time, even with less stuff. They have sold that house. They've moved into a small little fixer-upper downtown in Wetumpka. They, are back working with the chamber. They're, you see Jeff a lot of times in a hat and shorts and a T-shirt, and he's riding a one-wheel, downtown somewhere. And it's like, well, I can't do that. And here's Renaissance woman, doing paintings and posting it on social media. And it's like who can do that? Who can do that? Nobody's suggesting that the decisions that they've made are the decisions you have to make. But I guarantee you, and this is what Vanessa wanted, she was like, that's not it at all. I guarantee what she said, all of us, though, know that God is asking us to do something, to take a small step of some sort, to create, even over the last few weeks, like we've been talking about, just to intentionally create a little space. Because with space comes clarity. And when there's clarity, we can actually hear God's voice. And sometimes it's just enough light to take the next step. That's what she said. Like that, it's just enough to take the next step. It's not like I know what life is going to look like in 5 years, or I'm going to quit my job, or, oh, well, you quit your job and now you've got this like super amazing, you get jobs every other day. And it's like, oh, you're doing great. Like, what if that doesn't happen to be? That's not, you've missed the point. That may not work out for you that way, but I guarantee you what obedience comes from clarity, and through obedience comes peace. Whether it produces all of the, the material thing, like the material things are beside the point. Those are things that are the distraction oftentimes, the things that clutter, the things that cause us to kind of push back against what God is maybe nudging us to do. Because I guarantee you, every person in here has felt this tension at some point in their life, no matter what job you have or career path you take or whatever your financial situation is. We all feel oftentimes this stress of this kind of burden of, this is what I have to do now to make ends meet, but I'm not sure it's giving me a lot of purpose. This isn't really that, this isn't what I thought life was supposed to look like. I'm missing out on time. Does anybody ever feel that? Oh, I'm missing out on time with my kids as they're growing up. I'm missing out on time with, my family, with my spouse, with my parents. And when you think about these things, and it's like, or a hobby, or, something else that you love to do, but you've sacrificed those things because, well, we've just pursued all of the stuff that doesn't ultimately satisfy. And we know that. And yet we oftentimes never do anything about it because it feels overwhelming, because it feels like, well, that's so drastic, that's so big. But this was a process of years, and it's not been a perfect ride. That's what she said to me the other day. She said, it's not been like grace-filled, okay? This hasn't been a grace-filled process, okay? This isn't just like super easy. Every step has been difficult. It's been a challenge, but it's just been a small step of obedience. Does that make sense? It's just been a step of obedience. And so the question that I want us to walk away with today trying to answer for ourselves is, first of all, this would be kind of a twofold. First of all, have you created enough space in your world, in your life, for God to be able to speak clearly to you? For you to be able to hear how God is speaking to you. Because if you're like, well, I don't even know what I should do, like I have no clue, like what a step would take, then maybe there's not been enough room in your life to hear that. Which is why, and Pastor Leroy is really going to hone in on this next week. What does a Sabbath really look like? Because he's talked about the decision that they've made as a family over the last several weeks to like really intentionally create a true Sabbath day. So I don't have time. Just this is what they've done, okay? And the difference that it's made, just the hard decision, oftentimes the sacrifice. But if you don't feel like you know what the next step is, then maybe there's not enough clarity because there's not enough space to hear. And then, but maybe some of you do have the space and you do know what it is. Are you willing to take the step? Maybe it is something as simple as creating a Sabbath. Maybe it's something like beginning to give or to tithe on a regular basis. Maybe it is a step like that. Maybe it's a stronghold in your life, something, an addiction, something that makes everything very foggy. It's hard to see through it in order to hear from God because there's kind of this looming guilt that we feel, something that's consumed us. If you know what it is, if you do have the clarity and you know what God is telling you, are you willing to be obedient just in that step for right now? We're not suggesting change everything, sell the house, quit the job, and go live in a teepee somewhere, with one change of clothes. Nobody's suggesting that. But we all have the potential to take a step. We all know that God is speaking to us in some way. Are you willing to hear it, and are you willing to be obedient? That's what I'm going to ask us to do as we close today. I want to pray for you and kind of over you, because this can be sort of hard to like really chew on. It's like it feels very abstract, because we hear their story and we wonder what it means for our story. But I want there to be clarity as we walk out today. But I just wonder if you would just receive this and be open to this, and you can stay seated and you don't have to be super extravagant, but I'm just going to ask that you would bow your head so that, it's not awkward, and then just open up your hands if you would. Just right where you are, and just lay them on your legs, guys, so it's not awkward. Just open up your hands. Just as a physical sign of saying, God, I want to hear from you. And then just let me pray this over you. Heavenly Father, I thank you for a story like this, that we can take a break from just kind of the normal, what's going on, sort of the normal, like, let's hear a sermon, but just to actually hear how this has been applied, what spiritual growth looks like specifically in somebody else's life and decisions that they've made. Not that it's always been perfect or easy, but just that they've been willing to do it. God, I just thank you that we can do that freely, and that even through their story we can hear from you. But here's what I'm specifically asking. As people are bowing their heads and they've got their hands open, my prayer is that would be a sign that they're ready and willing, and that they desire to hear from you, that they're willing to say, God, I want to hear from you. Would you show me how to create the space I need so that there's clarity around what it is you're asking me to do with what I've heard today? And so, God, would you pour out your Spirit in that way, just a spirit of clarity, of discernment. Give us wisdom to hear exactly what you're speaking to us today, that we would not be just bothered by that we would not resist it, but that we would hear it, be willing to hear it, and that, God, that you would give us the courage to do something with it, to take that step, to move the needle forward in your direction. Because as we take that step of obedience, it opens up new doors to you speaking to us in new ways. And God, it's one step, one foot in front of the other. It's just enough light to take that step today. God, I pray that would happen for each of us today as we walk out of these doors, that we would hear that we would respond to it, and ultimately, God, that you would be glorified in the stories that are created from what happens after today. We love you. We offer this to you in Jesus' name. Amen.